Bitcoiners, welcome back to another episode of Fed Watch. Per usual, I'm sitting here across from Ansel Lindner. We're going to be doing something slightly new today. Ansel last week put together a fantastic article breaking down, kind of several aspects of El Salvador and, what challenges are in front of El Salvador kind of moving forward based on, what the country is actually like, what the country's history is like, demographics, different aspects of the country, and how that is going to affect its unprecedented move towards adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. Ansel, this was a fantastic piece. And I would say a little bit of a more level-headed take on El Salvador, whereas like you either have hyper bull or hyper bear kind of commentary. There hasn't really been something that is level as this that I've seen. So excellent job, but excited to chat with you about it here on FedWatch. I'll hand it to you. Tell me about this piece. What was the impetus of writing it? What kind of went into doing this research?
Yeah, it's kind of rare when a analyst will say, "Oh, well, it's going to be about the same," because kind of the conclusion here is that Bitcoin will benefit El Salvador, but it won't make a gigantic difference. And my impetus behind writing it was because to maybe temper some of the optimism and the enthusiasm. Yes, Bitcoin is going to change your world, but El Salvador adopting Bitcoin isn't going to make El Salvador into some paradise. So that was why I wrote it.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting. And I think maybe it might turn El Salvador into a paradise if they can actually execute on the long enough time horizon. But it seems as though when there's like this kind of excitement and Bitcoin changes the world and Bitcoin fixes this, a lot of people expect that to happen tomorrow, right? They don't necessarily, kind of comprehend that this is a very complicated and difficult situation that the president of El Salvador, Bukele, is in, as well as the people of El Salvador and all of the international stakeholders involved as well.
Yes, and I tried to touch on the international stakeholders in the piece with the IMF and the World Bank and all of that stuff, as well as international relations in trade deals within Central America and with the United States and stuff like that. So yeah, I tried to touch on all of that in the piece. Bukele is a fascinating character because I try to tie him into a lineage of El Salvador politics. And in El Salvador, it's a very unique situation. So for its entire history, it's been kind of a meeting place of cultures. So if you go back to the pre-Columbian era, you have Mayan and Aztec and Lenca, some other Central American peoples, and they kind of all meet in what is today the El Salvador area. So it has a long history of many different groups, many different stakeholders within the country internally, and then bringing that into like the 19th and 20th centuries, you see political strongmen, you see a gang type structure for a government, and even into the 90s. Bukele is kind of he's much more friendly to the West, much more friendly to free markets and to Bitcoin. But I see him similar in some of his tactics that he's used recently as somewhat of a continuation of the same idea that El Salvador has always been in the same sort of situation. So that's why I say, looking forward, if you look forward 50 or 100 years, El Salvador will probably be generally in the same place that it is today, maybe a little bit better off.
Okay, well, I mean, unpopular opinion there. I definitely think that there's a lot of execution risk when it comes to El Salvador, adopting Bitcoin. But as a Bitcoin believer, to hear you say that it's not going to make any sort of meaningful change to the country, it's a little bit disheartening to some degree, because I personally believe that there's second and third order positive effects to adopting Bitcoin and adopting sound money. And, even talking to the Bitcoin evangelists in El Salvador and listening to them on interviews, they seem to be feeling the immediate effects of adopting Bitcoin in their community.
Yeah, and I do say in the piece that I expect it to double or even triple the standard of living in El Salvador. And that's a significant impact. But then if you look at from a broader scale, that just puts it on par with Panama in Central America. So it can be very good for El Salvador, but it's not going to bring El Salvador into the range of, say, a Hong Kong or a Singapore, some of these other really small, very high standard living places. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
so before we get into the kind of actual breakdown, because you got very, very thorough with this analysis, this is not just, some off the cuff opinion here, but can you just kind of talk a little bit about like what would it take for a small nation like El Salvador to truly put itself on the global scale, something like a Hong Kong or a Singapore, which is, obviously when it comes to per capita punching power, they're punching way above their weight. But again, they are, relatively smaller populations, kind of similar to El Salvador, which has fewer citizens than, most American cities, right? Los Angeles, Miami, they're all bigger than El Salvador, and these are just American cities.
Yeah. So putting on the geopolitical hat, you have to, I mean, obviously free markets are going to be a big thing. So lower corruption in your government, um, you know, uh, just corruption in society, low violence, that type of thing, that will help free markets function properly. And then the next thing is geographic location. So if you look at Hong Kong or Singapore specifically, these are very, very small countries, or Hong Kong maybe isn't a country anymore, but it's a very, very small uh, geographic area, but they are on choke points of international trade. So for El Salvador to really be uh, take a step up the notch into not just being a regional influence in Central America, but maybe being a continental influence in North America, they would have to have uh, access to trade routes, and really they just don't have that. So I don't see. Even with the perfect execution and the perfect free markets, El Salvador will be a nice place to live, but it will never be, a North American player, I guess.
Okay, well, I mean, even in those situations, granted the kind of geographical limitations, it as a first step for Bitcoin and Bitcoin continuing to, you know, proliferate. I can't pronounce that, but throughout these economies that don't necessarily have sovereignty and financial control, it's going to be very interesting. Let's jump into this article because again, you touch on a lot of different things, in terms of the history, economy, geography, demographics. Like you did the real analysis that people need to be doing around this kind of macroeconomic situation. Do you want to just jump into like going a little bit more deeper into, the history and the politics?
Yeah. So, well, I did cover a lot of it right there early on in our conversation, but before the Spanish came, there was many different cultures that kind of went back and forth in this area. The reigning culture at the time of the Spanish coming was the Peoples, and they were related to central Mexico, so to the Aztecs or the Toltecs. And they came down and they built a few different types of megalithic structures, but they never like flourished as much in El Salvador as they did in central Mexico. And to me, I draw the geopolitical conclusion that it is due to the geographic limitations of the area that El Salvador sits. So uh, then when the Spanish came, they were incorporated into New Spain, and that lasted for 300 years, as people probably know. And then when they broke apart from Spain after the Mexican War of Independence, they formed the Federal Republic of Central America. And by the end of that, that was a very short experiment, only about 40 years, I think. And at the end of that, San Salvador was the capital. And it eventually broke apart with all of these disparate Central American cultures like Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua. They all had their own um, structure and culture in their own area, and the federation fell apart. And I kind of said this is a great parallel for thinking about this region in general, that San Salvador was the capital city when it fell apart. So it's kind of maybe a cultural hub of Central America, or maybe not a hub, but it kind of encapsulates Central American culture in El Salvador. And then it fell apart because you just can't keep such a region like that is so geographically diverse with mountain ranges and rainforests and not very many good harbors, not a ton of arable land or agricultural land that you can use cheaply throughout the year. So it's just an area that is prone to decentralization. So then that after I think 1841, I think is when 1841 is when they declared their new government, and since then it was um, kind of dominated by strong political strongmen. Okay, they didn't even have fair and freely contested elections. Their first one was in 19. I have to look back in my piece. Oh man, it was in like 1931 was their first freely contested election, and that government only lasted for 9 months before a military coup. And so you can see the place of El Salvador lends itself to this type of decentralization, this type of kind of internal fighting. Right now, there is this very popular leader in Bukele, and he is, I think, very good for the country. I think he has already done great things, and he's going to continue to do good things for the country. But uh, he might be his regime might be the high point of centralization for the country. It's bound to break up into smaller regional power structures and internal conflict. So when you look, that's one reason why when you look 10 years out, it looks very good for El Salvador. But if you start looking 20, 30, 40 years out, that kind of breakup of the centralized power is going to come back.
Very interesting. So, I mean, ultimately, most Bitcoin, I'll say hardcore Bitcoin enthusiasts think that Bitcoin will force countries to break down decentralized to become more localized, right? They think that that's going to be a second and third order effect. And you see El Salvador is already having those tendencies, right? Like, the cultures are kind of broken up. If you look at other countries that are having this kind of, let's just say, difficulty keeping the entire geography together, it's because there's different cultures with very unique identities that occupy smaller portions of that. You can look at like Barcelona and the Catalan region in Spain, but there's countless of these across the globe. So you see El Salvador is not really in its current state being very stable as it is, right? And that might cause further fracturing despite or because of Bitcoin in the future.
Yeah, and as they centralize power right now, because they're doing a lot of arrests of the gang members, they're doing some deals with gang members to minimize violence in the country, and they're doing a great job so far right now. But once the power centralizes to the central government, you're going to have corruption, and you're going to have infighting within the government. Maybe after Bukele leaves, right after the strong central leader kind of exits the scene. So. That yeah, I do see that this area has very strong decentralized uh, nature to it, and it will probably return. But it's along with that though too is violence. There is this decentralization in El Salvador, but there's also a violence. Hopefully that violence doesn't return. Hopefully it's just like infighting of power politics, and my company is going to take over your company or something like that. But I fear that this region is prone to actual violence when you decentralize the power.
And I mean, does Bitcoin have anything to do with that dynamic? Or you just think that it's inherent to kind of the region, the cultures, the history?
Um, yeah, Bitcoin will probably mitigate it to some degree. And Bitcoin does fit El Salvador's uh, very unique kind of strengths. So it has some very big weaknesses geographically and politically, but it has some very unique strengths. And one of those is the clean energy, with geothermal, and they have a lot of hydro potential there. And Bitcoin is a very good fit for that, because a small nation like, let's say, the UAE over there in the Persian Gulf, um, they are a very small country, but they can export their energy, right? So they can become wealthy because they can export their energy around the world. Well, El Salvador is maybe not equally as blessed with energy, but they have a very high capacity for energy if they can exploit everything, but they cannot export it, right? You can't export geothermal energy, but you can mine Bitcoin with it and use that as your export, or use that as your industry. So I think that Bitcoin does fit a lot of these little niche things within the country that turn some weaknesses into strengths. So benefit Bitcoin will benefit the country. It just won't turn it into a paradise on earth.
Okay, so very sobering and realistic words probably here. Next in the article, you talk about the economy. You already kind of mentioned some of your expectations in terms of increased GDP and things like that. Do you kind of want to talk about like some of the history around Venezuela? Or sorry, gee, I keep saying Venezuela, but El Salvador's economy and some of these trade deals and different things that have kind of happened in the past that are setting up the country in a specific way today?
Yeah, so they back in 2004 they signed this Central American free trade agreement with the United States. So it was Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic. And so that is a very good thing. It is the second largest kind of trade agreement for the United States, other than NAFTA with Mexico and Canada. So it is an important thing for the United States. And my idea geopolitically of the future is that the U.S. will continue to be a massive player, probably the global hegemon for the foreseeable future. And so anytime a country like El Salvador can get close and have good relations with the United States, the better. They also have obviously the remittances, which is a big part of their economy. So they're a very small country with only 6 million people, not a lot of opportunity for their best and their brightest. And so a lot of times their best and their brightest, these are people, scientists or doctors or businessmen, actors and actresses, even some politicians have, immigrated to the United States. So a lot of the talent has gone abroad, and they send remittances back. And so these remittances are a huge part of their economy, up to 25% of their GDP. So uh, that is, if you can have a good trade agreement with the United States, you can have friendly relations, and you have a lot of your countrymen working in that country and sending remittances back. That is a good overall relationship to have. The other part of, well, there's two more parts of their economy I think are very interesting, are the free trade zones. These are zones they have set up um, for exports. So the businesses that are set up here are supposed to be export oriented, and imports into those regions are going to be tax free, and then exports are going to be tax free. It does a lot for building up industry within the country, so that is a benefit for everybody. It provides higher paying jobs, and it's a multi-partisan effort. It's not just Bukele set these up. They've been around for a long time, for probably 10, 15 years. And so this is a multi-partisan effort. There's a idea in the country liking free trade. So I think that's a big benefit as well. And then lastly is tourism. Of course, they have a huge potential for tourism. They have great beaches and great surf. I think it's some of the best surfing beaches in the
In the world.
Americas, in
Yeah,
the
no,
world.
some of the
Okay.
best in the world.
Okay. In the world are found in El Salvador. So they have a huge opportunity for tourism, and Bitcoin being global and borderless, being a very good currency for travel. That is also a niche that Bitcoin can help fill. But I just say the biggest part here in my mind is remittances, because even all of their free trade zones and their import exports, if you look at all these individual parts of their economy, remittances dwarf everything else. So all of their exports combined, remittances are double all of their exports combined as part of GDP. So I think that Bitcoin, obviously being tailor made for remittances like this, is a huge benefit.
All right, let's take a quick break from that episode. I want to tell you guys about our sponsor. It is Bitcoin 2022 conference. I am sure you saw the videos. You may have been there in person. Bitcoin 2021 was an absolute smashing success. It was the biggest conference in Bitcoin history, crypto history, whatever history of the digital asset sphere. Bitcoin is number one, and the Bitcoin 2021 conference is number one with a bullet. It was an absolutely incredible time. I was working my ass off the whole time, but I got to meet so many incredible community members. And I think the best testament to how amazing Bitcoin 2021 was not just all of the amazing, accolades and compliments that I got personally and our team got, but also it's the skin in the game in Bitcoin 2022. We have already sold close to 1,500 tickets. That is more than 10% of the people, everyone who went to Bitcoin 2021 have already purchased tickets to Bitcoin 2022. We have not released a date. We have not released a city. We have not released anything. That is the biggest compliment. That is the biggest skin in the game of the community being down for this conference. Bitcoin 2022 is going to be bigger than Bitcoin 2021. It is going to be better than Bitcoin 21 in every single way. And we are going to be bringing you the best opportunity to mingle with the biggest, the baddest, the most Bitcoin people on the planet. So join the revolution. Go to b.tc/conference. Get your tickets today. I don't know what the ticket prices are. They are going up. I think they're $249 right now. We just rolled out fiat ticket purchases. All the tickets purchased before today were all purchased in BTC. So get it, guys. Get it. Get this ticket. Be at Bitcoin 2022. See you there. Bitcoiners, I want to tell you guys about The Deep Dive. The Deep Dive is a new premium newsletter from the Bitcoin Magazine team in conjunction with my man, BTCization, Dylan LeClaire. Dylan is such a multifaceted and wide-ranging analyst. He does everything from on-chain analytics to macro analysis to hash rate and all that kind of good stuff. He does it all. He breaks down everything that's happening every single day with his daily dive. He's going to dive into what is happening in the market that day. So that way you don't have to pay attention to Twitter. You don't have to pay attention to anything else. You can just pay attention to the deep dive and he has you covered. And at the end of the week, guess what? You get a weekly recap. And at the end of the month, hey, we have a freaking report, a beautiful PDF breaking down all the activity of that entire month, what it means for Bitcoin, what you can expect moving forward. The Bitcoin market is going to moon. We are here to make sure that we maximize your stack. Go to members.bitcoinmagazine.com to sign up today. And if you use promo code BITS, you can get 1 month for free. So again, the deep dive, I've been checking it out every day and you should too. Back to the show. Yeah, and I mean, just to kind of point out the remittances angle, these are the countries again that are going to be most prone to adopting Bitcoin because if they can cut those remittance fees substantially, that it's going to have a really meaningful impact on GDP. And the fact that they rely so heavily on remittances is kind of a symptom of the fiat system, whereas fiat is centralizing talent into specific areas where the money is being printed and people are being drained out of these countries. I would highly recommend to the listeners to go check out the Bitcoin Magazine podcast that Aaron Van Werdum did with several members of the Bitcoin Beach team. And they were talking about how for the first time, the kids, their number one dream isn't to leave El Salvador and to go to America, that they actually see a future here. And, hopefully Bitcoin can make an impact as in, it helps these localities, maintain their talent. Brain drain is a huge issue if you are not living in a first world country.
Yeah, I hope so. I think these free trade zones might help along that way to get some kind of international businesses in there. But I think they'll always have that problem. Just being they have the highest population density in Central America. They don't have a ton of unique I guess, strengths for their country around like being on trade routes or being a banking hub or anything like that. So I think always there's going to be this drain, and hopefully it doesn't go so far. Maybe it doesn't go into um, the United States. Maybe it goes to Mexico. Maybe it goes to Costa Rica or to South America somewhere. But I think they will always have this brain drain because of just their geographic realities.
I find it very interesting how much you focus on geography because that's not changing. And
Yeah.
geography is it's very very important in how these different jurisdictions can maneuver themselves and can align themselves, and geography has a lot to do with resources as well. So y'all, Ansel's the best for this reason, man. He really has a holistic view on what's happening. But with that being said, rivers, rails, roads, ports, could be better and they can be improved, right? Do you kind of want to talk about your kind of analysis around maybe just the commercial potential of El Salvador?
Yeah, so I broke down their geography in waterways, and they have three specific kind of I guess you would call water regions in their country. On the western side, they have a border with Guatemala, and they have a river basin there. Then they have the Lempa River, which is kind of the large uh, basin that covers most of the country, but it's not navigable. So they don't have a lot of navigable miles of river. And then the last kind of water region is the Gulf of Fosenca in the south, or in the east, southeast. And that is a border region between Honduras and Nicaragua. So, um, all in all, they don't have really any navigable waterways. They don't really have any miles of commercial railroad. They do have a good uh, road system, which is a benefit that they're actually small, because I think their main port to the capital is only like 50 miles away. So that's, the entire country is pretty small. But geographically, they don't, from a transportation aspect, it's not very conducive to a high level of commercial activity.
Makes sense. So, I mean, let's talk about future projects, right? Again, you kind of teased out the potential of exporting energy. Can we reasonably expect Bitcoin to make an impact here in terms of the large gap that El Salvador needs to bridge in terms of kind of their logistics infrastructure, as well as their ability to export some of their natural resources? Again, you talked about the energy, but there's a lot here.
Yeah. Well, one of the benefits of not having navigable rivers is that you can put a lot of dams on them. And so the hydropower potential of El Salvador is pretty high. They also have these volcanoes. I think they have 4 active volcanoes within their borders. They've already started to harness at one or two of them, but there's a huge amount of potential left for geothermal, and those are a great fit for Bitcoin. They've actually been in recent years really trying to attract investors, specifically probably from the United States or other Western investors, to come in and help build up this potential of clean energy. And maybe with Bitcoin, now they'll have even another selling point to do that. And I do think that this could be a pretty quick reaction. Especially with the whole stuff from China going on, with the hash rate moving out of China. It's going to go try to find a new home, and maybe not El Salvador will get it right away, but if they can build up their capacity for this clean energy and cheap energy, then Bitcoin will easily slot in there real quick. I mean, how long does it take to get a big mining farm set up? It's not going to take 5 years. It will take maybe a year to get the plans, to get the hash rate, and to get it going. So I think that can benefit the country pretty quickly.
Well, one of my favorite things about your analysis, and this is the first time, and not the first time, but you are one of the first people that really turned me on to thinking about a analysis based on demographics and how important demographics are in kind of predicting what the future of an economy has. Um, let's talk about the demographics in El Salvador.
Okay, so they have pretty good demographics. If you look at, if you guys go to the piece, I could share my screen real quick. Can I do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you can see this demographics pyramid. It's really heavy on the bottom, which is what you want to see. That means it's a fairly healthy demographics. If you look at Japan or China or Europe, they're going to be really heavy at the top and then narrower as you go down. And that means your population is declining. So El Salvador has a fairly healthy demography at this point. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. One of the things as well, like they're starting to be scared that they will get caught in this kind of modern phenomenon of not having kids, right? Not meeting replacement rate, and so they will end up getting that upside down demographic pyramid. But some of the things that help them is one, they are a fairly religious country, and usually religious families, they have family structure is very important to them, and usually they have a higher rate of kids. Also, with the remittances, now I haven't seen anybody say this before, so I don't know how on this is, but with a higher rate of remittances, you actually have the ability to maybe support more children in that family. So you have one family member or two family members move abroad and send money home. Now your family can support more children, right? And so I think that there's a few things about El Salvador that might stave off this a coming demographic collapse, which most countries look like they'll eventually get to in this modern era. For one reason or another, all of these demographic pyramids are inverting. So hopefully El Salvador can stay away from that.
Yeah, I mean, again, demographics are so important. Here, me and you constantly doing this macro analysis. It really like sets things into perspective on like the future of these economies, and it's very interesting again to see like the West is just in this conundrum, and even Japan is in this conundrum, and where's the potential? Where are the demographics? It's South, right? It's in Africa. It's in Latin America, and honestly, just that one fact alone, plus the fact that Bitcoin has fewer hurdles to hop, makes me much more bullish on the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, you said that before, and I kind of agree with you on that. At least demographics wise. So even China is in this problem or has this problem. They are right now. China is the fastest aging population in the world. It's the fastest aging population the world has ever seen. It is in a demographic decline like we have never seen in China. And so I think that affects everybody, all of these major economies in the Northern Hemisphere. So the Southern Hemisphere could, this is the era where maybe there's a next China. Maybe Australia becomes the next China. No, they have bad demographics too, but maybe like South America, Brazil, who knows? Maybe somebody down there becomes the next China, the next manufacturing capital of the world, and they have the demographics for it, where everyone else is depopulating.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned South America, but Africa has very much been a geography that people are very, very bullish on. And when it comes to demographics as well, they're very, very young. A lot of future, labor potential there.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I personally am not that bullish on South America or Africa, but I think that they will have good demographics, and so perhaps yes, those are going to be where a lot of the unskilled factories are, where there's a lot of well, I know Africa is really blessed with natural resources, so maybe they become, like I said, maybe Nigeria becomes the new China. Who knows?
So let's jump into Bitcoin. We've been talking about how Bitcoin fits into this, but in the way you formatted your article, it's kind of the last thing you talk about before your conclusion. But do you want to just kind of dive into Bitcoin specifically and some of these points that you made in the article?
Yeah, so I kind of picked out three things. So I tried to do as comprehensive and brief coverage of the entire country in the first part of the article. And then I say, okay, well, out of this unique situation that El Salvador finds itself in, how can Bitcoin really come in and make a difference? Or how do I think that it will happen? And so I pick out these three sections of remittances, Bitcoin mining, and tourism. I think Bitcoin really fits into there. And I kind of break it down a little more in depth. But overall, my conclusion I come up with is a doubling of the GDP in the next decade, and possibly a tripling of the GDP in the next 20 years.
So just to put that into perspective, like what does that kind of performance stack up against other nations that could, grow and maybe even past GDP improvements? Just kind of like, to me, it's strange to hear GDP might double, and on the flip side, it's not going to be that big of a deal in terms of the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, when you look at purchasing power parity, I mean, I'd have to let me bring up the, sorry about this, per
Guys,
capita GDP.
I keep hitting Ansel with these off the cuff questions, so I apologize, Ansel, for always putting you on the spot here.
No, that's cool. I just want to make sure I get my numbers right. So, Central America GDP, we have Panama is the largest by far. So let's see, they are growing at 10%, Panama, and they have a per capita GDP of almost triple of El Salvador. Costa Rica is almost double what El Salvador is right now. And so you can see, like, some of these other Central American countries, per capita GDP, El Salvador is actually ranking pretty low. And so even if they double, they're just going to be really good within Central America. And if they triple, then they will become the best in Central America, or the highest in Central America. And then we can go up from there. But yeah, I think that they have opportunity to really. I said in my piece that they've always punched above their weight in Central America, and I think that their specific strengths of tourism potential and mining potential, and remittance potential is so great that they'll probably continue to punch above their weight and maybe even be one of the best economies in Central America.
All right. Well, a little bit of bullishness there, y'all. I'm hopeful that El Salvador is going to be a shining example of Bitcoin moving forward. But with that being said, there's still a lot of difficulties in front of them. Ansel kind of had much more of a historic looking analysis and look forward here. But I've spoken to several members of different groups in El Salvador who are trying to move things forward for Bitcoin, as well as Aaron Van Werdum, our technical editor, who's been in El Salvador for the past few weeks. And there's a lot of headwinds. There's a lot of difficulties. And Bukele, while, it seems as though he has the best intentions of the country, obviously is not perfect. And within the country, it's not without enemies. Right. And now Bitcoin is almost like this politicized thing where it's like, if you're pro Bukele, then you're open to Bitcoin. But if you're against Bukele, then Bitcoin is just equally bad as everything else he's doing. So there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of unknown information. There's a lot of kind of uncertainties. And in terms of a timeline, the government and Bukele, they're trying to launch their Bitcoin wallet and the Bitcoin legal tender law by the end of August. So that's coming up very, very quickly. And even from the beginning, I thought to myself personally, wow, that's very ambitious. And what happens if they can't hit that ambitious timeline?
Okay, so you said, but yeah, I'm interested to see what Aaron Van Werdum has to say about all of this. I hope he writes something up. And yeah, a lot of the firsthand. I mean, obviously, I've never been to El Salvador. I don't plan to go to El Salvador, and I don't have any firsthand experience of the people or the locations that I'm writing about here. But taking a historical perspective, a geopolitical perspective, these are, I tried to identify geopolitical realities, and you can have a lot of fluctuations in the short term. Decade to decade, you can have a really good decade or a really bad decade. And so but you need to obey these geopolitical realities. So it's going to be around a trend, and maybe a lot of people are finally someone has adopted Bitcoin as legal tender, and they have a bunch. They're very, very bullish on this news. Great, I think it will be very good for the country. But this is not going to, like I keep saying, it's not going to turn El Salvador into a powerhouse or anything.
Before we get back to the episode, I want to tell you guys about Bitcoin Magazine. Bitcoin Magazine is the oldest publication covering Bitcoin, and we've been covering Bitcoin since 2012. Y'all, I'm so proud to be working for Bitcoin Magazine. We spend all day trying to scour the internet for the top news, the top plebs, the top subjects, conversations, everything that has to do with BTC, the asset, BTC, the culture, BTC, the revolution. We are here for it. We are here for BTC and BTC only, and we want to give back to the Bitcoin community. Hit us up if you want to contribute, and go follow us on Twitter. Go subscribe to this podcast. Go follow us on YouTube. All of the places that you can find Bitcoin Magazine, we are there. Instagram, Reddit, everywhere. We're there. We're there. Follow us for the best Bitcoin knowledge. Back to the episode. All right. Well, I think we can transition from speaking about El Salvador specifically and talk about Bitcoin a little bit more generally. As we sit here, Bitcoin is trading under $30,000. Today, I believe, is the 19th of July. So, or sorry, the 20th of July. So the day before this podcast is live. Ansel, let's talk about Bitcoin in general and what you're seeing on the chart. As well as elsewhere.
Well, the chart has looked very very bearish for the last couple of weeks. If we go back to, I want to get the dates right. Sorry about this, guys. If you go back into mid-April, it did look like Bitcoin could recover quickly and bounce back up. But ever since then, it broke back down into the low 30,000s, and it has looked very bearish. And there's a couple things that I've been watching with the GBTC unlock, which looks to be kind of fake news in a way. A couple other things like the SEC decision on the new ETFs. There just seems to be a wait and see approach right now, and in that kind of environment, price can trickle downwards. So I think that's what we're seeing. I don't know if we'll see a big sell-off. These things usually end with a big wick to the downside, but if that is the case, it'll be extremely brief.
So you think Bitcoin holds this price level?
Well, like I said, the typical pattern is to have a massive sell-off and a big wick to mark the bottom. We haven't seen that yet, but this time could be different. But if it does wick down like that, I think it will be brief.
Gotcha. So what price level could it wick down to?
A lot of analysts are saying 24,000. I was calling 24,000 when we went up to 42,000. This was back in January. I was calling for 24,000, and we never quite reset down to that level. We just stopped at this 29,000, right about where we are today. And so a lot of analysts are saying back down to 24,000. Some I see are saying to test the previous all-time high of 2017. So down to about 20,000. I don't think the market will hit either of those. It'll try to cheat people out or, wreck as many people as possible. So if there is a wick, I wouldn't bet on making it to 24, but maybe it gets down to 27,000.
All right. Well, I have a limit order there sitting at about 26. So maybe that I should push that up a little bit.
That's
but
a good
with
level.
that being,
That's a good level.
Yeah, with that being said, like the key for me outside of everything else is just seeing how empty the mempool is. So the backlog of transactions is non-existent, right? And this is actually a first in what you would call a capitulation event as well, right? So, what that's telling me is that in terms of like actual skin in the game, people utilizing the network, it's very little. And then on top of that, a lot of this price action is kind of happening exclusively on centralized platforms, right? It's not hitting the blockchain per se, which I don't know if you can learn anything from that, but it's kind of telling me that, hey, the Bitcoiners are holding, and these new hands, these new buyers, these people who came in at potentially above 50K, they're not using Bitcoin correctly. They're still on centralized exchanges, and they're the ones who are setting the marginal price right now.
Yeah, is a dynamic as well with Lightning Network. So Lightning Network has been increasing steadily over the years since 2017, and so who knows? Maybe Lightning Network is taking what 20% of the load off of the network, and so that marginal amount is able to keep the mempool that much lower. Some of the use cases that were being built for on chain now are built with Lightning, and so that takes off some transactions. So it is a big signal that fees are so low. I agree with you, but I don't know what conclusions to draw from that other than maybe that means there's strong hands, and so we won't see a big wick to the downside because there's actually a lot of strong hands. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, all the on-chain, analysts and people who are kind of looking at Glassnode and these other platforms that are trying to build some heuristics into the blockchain data, they're saying yes, strong hands are holding and accumulating, whales are holding and accumulating, and then new holders are dumping. So that's what the on-chain heuristics from Glassnode and others are saying. But again, like it's hard to really tell. And again, these are just heuristics, so I don't know how much of it is just narrative, but from my gut, and from my interactions with the Bitcoin community, it seems like there's a lot of bears, there's a lot of inks, but at the same time, people are still stacking, people are still here, and uh, despite, let's just say, metrics across the board in terms of viewership, page views, that kind of stuff for Bitcoin Magazine, kind of seeing a local bottom or a local low. It does seem like the hardcore convicted cohort is still larger and active.
Yeah, it's very interesting too about I mean, we've talked about this macro stuff now for almost 60 episodes, right? I think we're on 59. And uh I think there is a lot of worry on the macro side. So, like we said last episode, the entire global economy seems to be peaking in this reflationary cycle and possibly rolling over in the next few months. And so that could also be affecting the Bitcoin price, maybe going towards a risk off environment, and that will affect Bitcoin. The dollar is strengthening. So, from a macro point of view, it makes sense that Bitcoin would sell off here. I think it's very important too that one of the reasons why I've been stressing that this deflation versus inflation debate is because I don't want Bitcoin to wrongly or people to panic sell Bitcoin because we have some sort of deflationary shock, or it doesn't look like inflation is coming again, like it probably won't. So it's very important to know how Bitcoin is going to fit into the future. We've talked about that a lot on this show. And so, yeah, that's all I got for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, Bitcoin solves a lot of problems, but you need to diagnose the right issues. And that's the hard part, right? Because the current system is all about lack of transparency. Like the way that it can operate is through a shroud of deception and hiding and papering over details and facts. And again, it's really hard to diagnose the initial issue. The central bankers can't diagnose it, all the fiat economists can't diagnose it. And it seems as though, Bitcoiners are having a difficult time diagnosing exactly what is wrong. But with that being said, maybe Bitcoin doesn't solve the current issue, but are the current issues with the financial system, but it is a completely separate, independent alternative that, has no inflation, that has no deflation, that is a fixed supply perfectly scarce monetary asset. And hopefully the world can onboard to it so we can just forget about the chaos that is the fiat system today.
Yeah, perfectly said. I mean, I think that we can't also forget that Bitcoin is a Veblen good. So as price goes down, demand actually goes down. And as price goes up, demand goes up. So we will have these very wild swings, and it needs to find a very, what's the new term? Diamond hands. It has to find a new diamond hands bottom. And perhaps that's 30,000, but we'll find out.
All right, Ansel. Thanks so much for writing up this awesome post about El Salvador and what is happening with Bitcoin adoption there. We'll be able to track how close your analysis is to reality. I think the next 40 so days are going to be very, very exciting for El Salvador and Bitcoin in general, and excited to bring a lot more insight into that. But until then, to all the listeners, you guys can find me at CK_Snarks. You can find the podcast, of course, at FedWatch and at Bitcoin Magazine. And you can find Ansel at Ansel Lindner. Ansel's raising his hand. He has one more thing to say.
Yeah, I just want to say that don't worry about this 40 days, the 45 days. If they don't get it implemented, then they'll push it another 90 days or 180 days. But eventually, El Salvador, with Bukele at the helm, they will get Bitcoin in there. So.
All right. I love it. Yeah. Hey, hopefully I know that it is a complex situation. So hopefully we can continue to make adoption happen on an independent individual level while the government gets their shit together over there. So that's the most optimistic thing about Bitcoin, is that Bitcoin doesn't have to wait for the government and these plans to actually make inroads into adoption. So I'm optimistic because of that. But until next time, Bitcoiners, catch us on the other side. Give us those 5-star reviews. We appreciate all of your listens, and we appreciate you guys sharing the show and all the positive feedback. I've been getting great feedback on the show, and we're going to continue doing it.